you don't have a story to tell. You don't have something to invent. You just have to tell them exactly what it is that you're doing. Because in the world where they can get informed anywhere, they're going to value this transparency.
Welcome to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, a product marketing community that gives back. Our guest, Bruno Aziza, former Group Vice President at Oracle, now Head of Data and Analytics at Google Cloud, discusses customer focus, analyst relations, product rationalization, and go-to-market strategy with Crispin. Let's dive into it right now.
Welcome to today's PMM Hive Talk with Bruno Aziza. The theme is Up and to the Right, the story of a turnaround. It's a story about really an amazing turnaround for the Oracle Analytics products. Up and to the right refers to the Gartner Quadrant, where the Oracle Analytics products move from a niche to a visionary. But really all of the analyst firms and the press have recognized that Oracle's really made tremendous progress in the last couple of years in the analytics space. But this program is not about what happened, because that's all out there. It's all public. You can go and Google for that. It's about how. And so I'm delighted today to have Bruno Aziza with me on the program. Bruno is the Group Vice President for AI and Analytics at Oracle. Prior to that, he's run marketing for several companies in the analytics space like AtScale, Alpine Data, Sisense. He was part of Microsoft's BI team before that, spent time at Business Objects and SAP. He's written 2 books about data analytics and EPM. He writes for Forbes Monthly. I'm delighted to have Bruno on the program today.
Well, thanks for having me on, Crispin.
Great. So let's get straight into it. So when you arrived at Oracle, what was your, obviously the sort of the first step to thinking about strategy and about what to do is understanding what situation you're in. So what were your immediate conclusions when you sort of showed up and you sort of figured out what you needed to do next?
Yeah, well, so I think maybe I can even talk about what happened before I joined. So, the first assessment of a company for me is, do they have the technology? Is this a growing market? What about the talent? And I think that part of my first assessment was trying to figure out the environment in which Oracle was, and absolutely amazing technology, right? So leadership in the database, leadership in the application business, amazing engineering, some of the best database developers are at Oracle. And so the question was, why didn't people not know about the Oracle Analytics innovation? Here they had this AI and this mobile first and this cloud first analytics asset, but very few people knew about it. And even myself, when I was at Microsoft and I was in the various startups that you talked about, I didn't really know what Oracle Analytics was really all about. And so that was my first assessment, is why is there's this awareness problem? And as anything, the awareness is always kind of the symptom of something else. And so my first investigation was picking up the phone and calling all the customers. So that was my first step, and it's probably the first lesson is, when you don't know, don't assume, just ask. And the best people you should ask to is your customers. So I got the list of the top 150 customers by consumption, and I called them up. And I can tell you more about what we discussed when I did those interviews.
Yeah. So what? So first thing you did really was sort of call 150 customers, and what did you ask them?
So the call was pretty straightforward, and in a way, it was probably the easiest call for me, in the sense that I introduced myself. I explained to them that my objective was to be a partner to them, and I wanted to understand why they chose an Oracle Analytics, what was their process, and how are they innovating at scale with the technology. I think, Dave Kellogg in one of your interviews talked about looking for the patterns. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for, what are the patterns that led these customers to choose this over anything else? And what were they doing in terms of innovating at scale? And then I guess the third part of it is, what was in their way? And then I put myself on mute, and I would just write down just about everything to get to some kind of understanding, global understanding of what are all the patterns, what are the right ones, because you want to optimize for the best customers and the best patterns, but also kind of understand the process and why do not other customers know about it. What's unique about these customers that they're succeeding and they've chosen Oracle Analytics. And so out of part of that, we identified quite a few things that turned into a scorecard for me that had 8 dimensions. And from this scorecard, after I was done with the customer interviews, I went off and I started out interviewing all the analysts that I relied on. So, analysts at Gartner and Forrester and Ventana and 451, and start now getting their perspective on the market and what we needed to do in order to take Oracle Analytics to the next level.
Oh, okay, cool. So, what did you learn from the customers as you talked to them about these patterns? What were your big takeaways there?
There's quite a few. The first one was this idea that, and I think this has changed a lot for your product managers that are listening to. I think, as a software vendor, you've got to understand a few things. The first thing is the decision of technology is a very personal choice. So your customers need to understand that you're invested in their personal success. And I mean personal, not the logo, not the company. I mean that particular individual. And so what I mean by that is, you want to understand from a career standpoint what you can do to enable those customers. So for me, it was, we never really had that conversation with them before. The relationship, the historical relationship was, here's what you're going to buy, here's what value you're going to get out of it, and here's kind of how you're going to deploy this software. But in the service-based world, which we are in, where people buy cloud services, you got to worry about what we call beyond the bits, which is beyond just the bits, the product, the software that's being built, and you got to start worrying now about the human relationship. So an example of one of the things we implemented is we focused on the promotions of our champions. Every time a prospect or buyer of Oracle Analytics gets to a career milestone, we celebrate that with them. We send them a kit and we make it visible. So Derek at Outfront Media, Bishma at Riverbed, we celebrated with them. So they never really had that level of treatment of where a vendor would come to them and say, look, I'm your agency of success. That's the first one. And as you hear me, by the way, name those customers, you notice I start with their first name because I'm really trying to understand the individual themselves, because I understand the choice is about themselves. They care about themselves, and I need to enable their career progression. The second piece is around how they procure the service. So one of the advantages of being a large vendor is that over 40 years of leadership, you develop a lot of different products. And we had, when I joined, 18 products, 18 SKUs that you could buy for Oracle Analytics. And one of the big design principles of our strategy is how do we make it simplify for the prospects to buy them? How do we make it easy for our partner ecosystem to deploy it? So we went from those requirements to identify the use cases. I was talking earlier about the patterns, and we found 3 patterns. So what we said is okay, well, 3 patterns, 3 product lines. Mm-hmm. And so one of the first areas of development for us was going from 18 products to 3 products. And then, of course, licensing, how they buy it, how much it costs, how it aligns to how we go to market and how the competition goes to market. Because ultimately, when you're building a product, it has to be aligned with how people are procuring it. And the context for that is their internal context and the competition in the market. And it's also got to be aligned on how you're selling it. And what I mean by that is, what is your distribution model? How are your salespeople selling it? How are your partners implementing it? And so adapting to that is what really allowed us to kind of really take off and be, really aligned with the individual and the company's goals.
I'm going to have to pick your brains just a little bit more on the product proliferation topic. I can't resist. Sure. Because, I'm really interested in this because I've seen so many times the stark difference between a company in a particular space that presents 15 products to their customers, and another company in the same space that presents 3, and just, they do the same thing, and just how much clearer it is for everybody when it's 3, yeah. Right? So, I love that. I love that idea of going from a large number to a small number and basing it on what people do, basing it on use cases. In other words, having some kind of an intelligent boundary around the product, not a random boundary that's really historical, which is where a lot of people end up. Over years, you end up with these sort of fragmented product lines, and in a sense, the customer has to do the product marketing manager's job by going and reading all this stuff and then saying, what does that really mean? Oh, it means you do 3 things. And it's not their job to do that, right? It's the vendor's job. Anyway, but my question for you is this, is that it's much easier, prevention is much easier to cure than cure in this context. If you happen to be there at the right time, stopping product proliferation, that's not that hard. But after the fact, re-wrangling all of this stuff is really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
So how did you do it?
I think you're right. I think just one comment on the one product strategy could also have a double-edged sword here, because you don't want to think that your product is the answer to everything, right? So you got kind of two opposites. You got product proliferation on one side, where you just have too many products and it's just become a nightmare. And then you've got the opposite, where you're one company with one product and you're trying to convince everyone that your one product solves everything, which is also wrong. So the way we did it is, the interviews of these customers led to three very distinct patterns. What are these patterns? One is, there is a population in the market today in the analytics world that are looking for a horizontal solution that is IT led, where they want, basically think about it as a development platform for analytics or data-driven experiences. So they want to build these assets. They don't want to have to worry about storage or compute. They just want the tooling to be able to build their analytics application. And so that for us is Oracle Analytics Cloud. That's one product. Now, before that, there were kind of few options there, but the point is, you want to orient your engineering efforts, your go-to-market efforts towards that one problem that the organization is trying to solve. Enable my IT organization to have the tools to build as a service an analytics type of end product. It could be embedded in your applications. It could be dashboards, but the point is, they're developing it. The second use case is a set of companies that they are in a hybrid environment. They have data and applications on premise. They have data and applications in the cloud. They'll never just be only cloud. And they need a set of assets that allow them to essentially have the same tool set that you would have in the cloud first environment, but they want to have it in their own data center, if you will. So you need to have the same innovation available for them to deploy on whatever cloud they want, whatever mechanism that they want. And that's the second product. That's what we call Oracle Analytics Server. And now there's a third need of a different audience inside an organization that wants to have a turnkey solution. So they don't actually want to do the building. They want to see the insights be powered inside an application. And so for that, we call that OAX. It's Oracle Analytics for Applications. And it really lines up to the various applications that you have. So we started with ERP for our finance audience. Then we went to HCM for our HR audience. And then we're going pillar by pillar to make sure that as a business user, you really don't have to know anything about how these analytics were built. You're just now consuming them. And all you're doing is you're paying a monthly, or you're paying a per user price, and everything else just happens to be for you. So the collection of the data, the semantic composition, the design of the KPIs, the deployment of that, none of that you have to do. You're just consuming a service, if you will. Now, what's beautiful about this model is the base code, if you will, the base platform that's powering these three offers is actually the same. And all we do is a different level of service depending on what it is that we're deploying. So that was kind of the secret sauce there. There is a few other areas where you'd have to transition products. So for instance, we had 4 mobile clients. So, looking at these 4 mobile clients and really identifying, okay, what's the specific use case? And let's not fall into the trap where a feature is a use case. So for instance, if you were to say, oh, well, they want to do this one task, and for that you need a product. That's where you got to be really careful, because this one task is most often part of a bigger workflow. So isolate the workflow, isolate the pattern, and then package an offer around that. We also had customers that were on an aging technology, and we wanted to move them into the new world. So we had, from a licensing standpoint, we had to entitle them to the new technology. So that's another part as well. When you're walking into a situation that's not brand new, you got to devise a few mechanisms so it makes it easier for your customers to move into the future, if you will, at their own speed. So we did a lot of that as well. Does that give you a good answer?
No,
I know I babbled for a bit here.
No, it does, because and why is that you tell me, okay, we've got 3 products and this is what they're for, and guess what? I understand what you're saying. It's completely understandable, right? Anybody would understand that. It's not. I don't have to go away and do research, spend 4 hours on your website trying to understand what it is you're trying to say. You're not trying to say something. You're just saying something, right?
Saying,
and it's clear. So So thank you for that. So
this piece on clarity, I think, is also it's a big lesson. In the product-led economy where we are, and what I mean by that is, the world as we know in the software business is really changed dramatically, and it's changed on the supply and a demand. What I mean by that is your customers do not want to talk to sales. They do not want to talk to marketing. They are doing all their research online. And on our side, it's become a lot easier for us to build anything. So you've got this advantage and disadvantage. Advantage is your customers are very informed, so you have to be completely transparent. You know, one of the terms that was used in one of your interviews, I'm going to give a hard time to John Cressy. He said, you know, you got to think about how you're going to tell the story. And I know what he means there, but I think for people listening, you know, you don't have a story to tell. You don't have something to invent. You just have to tell them exactly what it is that you're doing. Because in the world where they can get informed anywhere, they're going to value this transparency. They're going to value this just straight to the point. I know what you're trying to do. I'm involved in your success. I'm going to get you promoted. And for that, I'm going to build something that's going to allow you to get there. So you got to be transparent. Like a great example for us, public roadmap. The roadmap that my team uses, you have it. You can go to a website. We update it every quarter. You can share it with anyone you want. Competitive differentiation. How is Oracle Analytics different from Microsoft and Tableau? I have a website for that. And you know what? I worked with Gartner to make sure that I built that website so you can get it and it's refreshed constantly. So this idea of transparency is very important because it says a lot about your intent as a partner to your prospect. And then on the product side, you also have to be really diligent on what it is that you're building, because the risk in being able to build just about anything is you're going to build just about anything and it's not going to meet demand. And so there's a great book here by Bruce Cleveland on this product market fit that if you're a product marketer, you got to read. You don't fall in the trap. Do not fall in the trap of just building anything. You know, there's a reason why your business exists, and it's because your customers are paying for it. And so, you know, don't just build things because they're cool. Don't be enamored with your technical vision. You know, build something that people can use so they can get promoted.
And that's The Traction Gap, right? By Bruce
Yeah.
Cleveland, his recent book. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good one.
Join our community, Product Marketing Hive, to meet fellow product marketers and access free resources, including training, playbooks, templates, and events. We are looking forward to seeing you. Check out our website, productmarketinghive.com, for more information.
Let me ask you. So, obviously, you've very successfully repositioned the Oracle product line. You've done a lot of real work because your starting point was customers, and your goal is transparency. So you're based in reality. You're doing real stuff because customers need it. But then we mentioned analysts, because there's what you're really doing, and there's the world, and do they know, which is an issue that you raised in the beginning too. So how do you make sure that you're able to for analysts to actually notice, what you've done, to become conscious of it, to sort of, I'm not going to say get on your side because they don't take sides, but at least they recognize what you've done. Yeah. So how did you handle the whole analyst relations side of all this?
So this is my favorite topic, because I think in general most product managers do not understand the role of analyst firms like the Gartner and the Forrester and so forth. Traditionally you think about, going back to that term, tell a story, you think about the analyst being at the end of your product cycle, where you got to explain to them what my vision is and so forth, and that's completely wrong. I mean, of course, you got to tell them where your vision is and what you believe in and so forth. But the way to do this right is actually the analyst is the beginning. And here's why. Just like I talked about, if you don't know, you need to talk to your customers. Think about the world of an analyst. Talk to, people like Rita Salam and Boris Evelson at Forrester. I mean, you talk to, and David Manninger at Ventana. These folks have thousands of interactions with your customers. And guess what? One, if they're your customers, I guarantee you that they're telling these analysts things they're not telling you. So you want to know that. Second, unless you have 99% market share, these analysts are talking to customers that are not your customers. So maybe they're customers to the competition, or they're people that are prospects. They're trying to be your customers, and they're trying to get advice from these analysts. So it is to your advantage to go to your analyst and say, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? After I've done all these calls with the customers, my first call was to Rita Salam. For one, somebody I respect and I've known for many, many years. And second, I know this context, right? I know she's got thousands of calls. She's talking to customers that don't want to talk to me, and she's talking to customers that I don't even know. So I wanted to tell her what does the market want me to do? What am I doing wrong today? What am I not doing enough of? And so forth. And then based on that, I start now to articulate a product strategy that really mapped to what she was telling me, what my customers tell me. And I'm not manufacturing here because the ingredients of my product strategy is based on what they're hearing. All I'm doing is I'm just broadening my vision, and I'm drilling into the known unknowns, if you will, but also the unknown unknowns, the places that if I never asked, I would have never been able to know that they were there. And so that's a really important part and that's what's going to make you successful with the analyst ultimately. You brought him in early, and it's not a game here. You brought him in early because you truly want to know what's going on, and you realize you're not the source of truth. You don't know probably 90% of what's going on in the market. And so you got to get all these inputs so that by the time you formulate it, well, it makes sense to the analysts and makes sense to the market. Why is that? Well, they are the input into your strategy. And I think often we misunderstand that. I think some of the biggest mistakes I heard from product leaders is that, the analysts don't get it and they don't understand my vision. And that's just extremely arrogant to think that way. I mean, sure, you have a unique point of view, but I don't think you have thousands of inquiries with people that you don't know and where you just listen and advise. And the analysts do. And so you got to respect that. And if you truly want to delight your customers, you got to listen to the analysts. And so that's how we got there. It's not a manufacturing of the truth. It's not a game on telling a story that doesn't exist. It really is input from the analysts because they're talking to your customers.
That's a great perspective. So something else that I want to ask you about is this fairly dramatic turnaround. I mean, it was a major turnaround, but it was also very rapid, right?
Yeah.
It was a very fast turnaround in a very big company, right? It's a big and with a complex portfolio. So these are not the easiest. There's small companies moving fast. That's an everyday thing. Very large companies moving very quickly with complex portfolios, not so much. So let's talk about execution. How did you manage to organize things? What sort of management infrastructure did you put in place to get the pace that you achieved?
Well, I'm happy you're saying that because there's no magic here, right? I mean, so a big component we talked about at the beginning is my assessment of the company is that do we have the tech, do we have the people, and we do, right? So a big part of it is that now that I understand what it takes to win based on my conversation with the customers and the partners and the analysts. We didn't talk about my interviews with partners, but that's also a big component, by the way, when you're building a product in a service-led world. You want to talk to your partners because they are in the trenches implementing the service. And so that's also an important, an important component. But to answer your question is, you use the term pace. In my world, I use the term space. I'll tell you why that is. So first of all, I didn't let go of anyone. I brought in new talent, and the folks that were on the team were very qualified and a ton of experience, right? So I organized them. Earlier, we talked about this 8-point scorecard that I built. If I look at this 8-point scorecard, it turned into 5 particular categories. So that's why I'm joking about pace and space. Is what are the categories? Well, they spell this acronym SPACE. S is for sellers, if you will. So this is your salespeople, your partners. And by the way, your customers are also your sellers. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. P is for product. What are we doing around product engineering, product discipline? And then I'll talk about that a little bit as well. A is for the analysts. What is the intentional work that we're doing with analysts to make sure they input, to make sure we get feedback, and then we're advancing together. C is customers. So for instance, in my case, as part of those interviews, I was really impressed with a lot of the customers. And one in particular was this 15-year veteran at Hertz that had used everything. He'd used Oracle Analytics, he'd used Tableau, he'd used Microsoft, and he'd been able to save $11 million using Oracle Analytics at Hertz. And so I thought, you got to come and run customer for me because, the way to succeed with customers is to have empathy. And what I mean empathy is not logical empathy where, oh, yeah, I understand what you're going through. The best is the emotional empathy where, no, I don't just understand. I've actually gone through exactly what you're going through. And Ben did that. And so because he'd experienced that, he came on the team, and a lot of the progress we've made is really based on the work that he's done. And then finally, E, the final letter of of space is for experience. And so that talks about the community work. What are we doing to enable our community to innovate at scale around community events, around services, around communication, blogs, as well as enablement. So for instance, when I joined, we had 30 organizations certified in Oracle Analytics. 2 years later now, we have 30,000, close to 30,000 people certified. And the way we did that is we created free training available on Udemy, and we let the world discover that, and it spread like that. So we oriented ourselves. We look at these 8 dimensions. It turned into 5 specific dimensions that essentially were the org structure of my team, SPACE. And these 5 letters are actually super helpful because every day we do a daily stand-up lined up to that letter. So today is a letter. Monday is going to be S. Tuesday is going to be P. Wednesday is going to be A. Thursday is C. And then we end the week talking about experience. So it's a way to organize yourself with what the market wants you to do, but also make sure that you execute against that vision by having daily touch points on those topics.
That's fascinating. But I have to say, if you chose my word, pace, then you could have every Monday off.
That's true, but I'm trying to outwork the competition. So I need to add 2 letters.
Fair enough. No, that's fascinating. And so you started to talk a little bit about what you're looking for in product managers. You're talking about this important idea of deep customer empathy, being able to identify with customers. So how do you think about product management today, and how has product management evolved in 2020, and sort of what do you look for in product managers? What makes a great product manager today?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's such a tough job. So if you go to the Horowitz website, the Andreessen Horowitz website, you'll find a blog called Good Product Manager, Bad Product Manager. I think this blog is probably 10 years old. But to me, it's really the genesis of what makes a good product manager. There's a lot in there. But the first thing that I would say is you're the CEO of the product. And I'm not taking this lightly. What I mean by that is this concept of space. You own the whole thing. If you're building a product, especially in a service-oriented or economy like we are, like you're not just delivering the software, you're delivering everything around in the experience. You got to worry about all these other components. So as a manager of product managers, the thing I worry about is being able to have that. Do you have the attitude of a CEO? So I haven't talked yet about aptitude, because the way we hire is attitude, aptitude, and then support. Support is my job. How do I make sure I remove all the hurdles? But the attitude around, do you act like you're the CEO is a big component. Now, in terms of aptitude, the best is you got to have had experience with this product, this pain. That's why I refer to emotional empathy here. Is sure, if you're smart and you went to a very good school, you're going to be able to understand these problems, but we're looking for something more. And so when I hire people into product management and product manager roles, I look at what they've done before. So the best for me, of course, is a customer, just like I talked about earlier. I think the second best for me is what you used to do, I think, is pre-sales. If you're in pre-sales, man, I'm sure you've dealt with bugs and unexpected behaviors of the product. So you relate to the urgency and then the issues there, and you want to go out and fix the problem. So for me, customer, pre-sales, and then the third one is kind of like a pre-sales. It's kind of your partner. If you've got implementers and partners that are doing the job, they're a great candidate to be product managers. Now, I've hired people right out of school. I have a great person right now, Brandon, very young, came out of school, and I put him through product school so he understands it. But what I was looking for there is if he doesn't have the aptitude yet, he needs to be, outdoing it on the attitude. And in this case, he had started his own company. So I know that in him, he's got the CEO of the product. He's going to take control. He's going to drive. And we're already seeing amazing results from this young guy who, when I started, we barely had any online customer reviews. I think if you look at the Peer Insight, we were not even in the top 10. As of today, we're number 2 on the Gartner Peer Insight website, and a lot of it is his work. And so that's what I look for: attitude, aptitude, and then look for somebody that really feels they're the CEO of the product across these 5 dimensions I talked about.
So just you mentioned bringing someone in from school, and I do know there are lots of aspiring product managers, folks who are in college now who'd love to get into product management. What advice would you give someone now who's sort of looking to the future and thinking about maybe one day becoming a product manager?
Well, I think probably the best advice that I could give you is learn to listen. I think probably one of the issues in our technology, when you have type A types of folks, is we have a very strong opinion and point of view on reality in general. But I think, to be a good product manager, you got to walk into just any conversation and make sure you watch your ratio of, how much you talk versus how much you're listening to people. And it should be listening 80% of the time. Second is I would look at how you're managing your time and your efficiency. We talked a lot about execution and space and the daily stand-up. A big part of what makes this execution work, and why, you mentioned how is it that we turn around so quickly. It is the people, but it's also the infrastructure, the management infrastructure. And that is something you can develop yourself today. I'll give you a few examples. One is look up this thing called the Eisenhower Quadrant. It's a quadrant that allows you to manage your time. Time is the only resource you can't make, and you can't really buy it. And so deciding where you focus your time is extremely important. And to my team, it's the first tool that I implemented. It looks at your task across importance and urgency. And you always want to be spending a lot of your time on stuff that's urgent importance and stuff that's extremely important and maybe not that urgent. So you have perspective. So that's the tool I would look at. And I also look at alignment tools to clarify what it is you're trying to do. You and I know this from Microsoft. It's an acronym called the ORPI that allows you to organize teams around their responsibility around a particular project. So ORPI is OARPI. So O is for owner, A is for approver, R is for reviewer, P is for participant, and I is for informed. And so this allows you, when you're driving a particular initiative, to have really good fluency on what role is each player playing here. I'm the owner, this person's the approver, you're a participant, you're a reviewer, you're informed. It's really important to map that out day one, because you'll find that in any organization, especially when you've got really educated, hard driving people, everybody's going to be an approver, everybody's going to want to give you their review and their opinion and so forth. And you can't have that. You got to be really clear from day one. When we're driving this project, this is who's driving the bus, and here's your roles. So you can be focused on your time and be focusing everybody else's time, and make sure you're aligned to get maximum impact very quickly. And then finally, of course, is get familiar to the concept of scorecards. I can run you through a few of the KPIs you should know as a product manager. And if you don't know them, you should research them right now, because if you don't measure it, it's just not going to happen, right? So you got to be able to measure so you can manage. And so having a scorecard view of the world is essential to not just having a strategy, but also executing it.
Wow, this has been a really interesting conversation, Bruno. Thank you for this. But just before we go, because I think we're coming up on time, I wanted to leave people with some parting thoughts, Bruno, from you on circling back to the bigger picture here. What advice would you give to a new head of product getting into a pretty complex situation? They're walking into something fairly serious. Maybe need for a turnaround, or at least need to inject a lot of energy into an existing business. What advice would you give someone in a new product leadership role who's in that situation?
Well, there's a lot. I think the first advice that I would give is, talk to your people, right? In my case, for instance, I'll tell you, in the space concepts, I hired new people, but I also used a lot of the knowledge of the existing folks. For instance, on the S side, I have 2 VPs right now that are running this area, and they're people that have been at Oracle for a very long time. Why is that? Because I want to make sure that I optimized for the Oracle distribution engine, which is an amazing engine, and I've got very senior leaders that are running that. On the product side, I brought people that you know, like Carrie and Pete and Jen Underwood and others that I knew had best modern practices for running product strategy and product prioritization. So I was able to kind of mix and match. On the analyst side, I had a great team in John Haggerty, for instance. I don't know if you remember John Haggerty. He was a Gartner analyst for 12 years. He's a VP in the team now. And I also, to complement that, I brought in Isabel Nuage, who you and I worked with, and she had put talent on the map. And so adding, kind of the mix of skill set, because I think often when you take on a new role, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to reinvent, everything is wrong and so forth. And most of the time, that's not true at all. I mean, a big part of why I took this job is because I was really impressed with the people on the team. So you want to do a combination of three things. You want to do a combination of optimizing the existing talent so you keep the momentum in places where they really know it. Like, for instance, in the E category, in the experience, Emily on the team, who leads the team, has been at Oracle for 4 years, I think. So she knows how to get things done. And we hired Beth, who also has been at Oracle, to hire her out from a different group so she can out and drive. So you want that combination of existing talents, a mix of existing and net new, and you want a net new talent in places where maybe it's just, it's something that it's never been done before. And then you want to add this jolt of energy. But, I would say if you're coming into a leadership role, don't come in with your, assumption that everything's broken, because most of the time it's not. And most of the time, the reason for why you're joining that group is because there's great talent, great technology. You want to leverage that. Don't do yourself a disservice of just wiping it all and then rebuilding it. You're going to lose momentum when you do that, and you're probably going to be wrong.
Great advice, and a really great conversation. Thank you so much, Bruno, for this, and congratulations to you and to everyone on your team for a fantastic business result. So, thank you so much.
Always great to talk to you, Crispin. Talk to you soon.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, a product marketing community that gives back. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and give a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. See you next time.